The dogs are barking, the planes are buzzing around, and then I was just sitting around and I was like, hey, perfect timing to film. Let's go ahead and do that. So here I am. All right. Today we are going to be talking about a very important topic, and as with these things, when I think about these discussions or what I should be discussing, this is one of those things that I never really put an importance to because I thought that they were pretty basic. But then, after speaking to several people and all this, I just realized that they kind of didn't know how things work. Okay, and I know that this is kind of vague at this point in time, but I'm gonna we're gonna get into that discussion, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So at the back here we have 7 rods. I don't have 7 reels. I wish. Okay, but each of those rods have a role to play, and they're very, very specific. Okay, we're talking about let's say our coverage for the weights of jigs that we're going to be talking about in this discussion is from max 100 all the way up to 900, let's say. Okay, and in this segment there are certain dynamics that you have to think about. There are certain situations wherein you would use one reel over the other. I have about 8 reels in my bag, but this is a combination of fast jigging and slow jigging reels. However, it doesn't mean to say that they're exclusive for that use, and this is the subject of our discussion. I know it's clear cut when I said there are some videos that I said that, okay, when you're fast jigging you need this reel, when you're slow jigging you need this reel, because at its simplest it is that straightforward. But fishing has a lot of areas wherein it's kind of contradictory, but it's kind of the correct way. Okay, so like take for example, using a slow retrieve reel for slow jigging. A lot of people that have been following would say like, hey, but you said, like, yeah, but again, you know, if it was that clear cut, it would be that easy, but it's not. Okay, and there are certain situations and certain situations wherein this is actually the most practical way and the most correct way of doing things. And it's kind of strange when you actually hear that from me, because I'm the guy who said that, okay, for depths, like, when you're fishing slow jigging, you have to use like fast reels because you want to be always in contact with the reel, with the jig, and that is correct. There are certain situations wherein you could still be in contact with the jig, and it's actually a disadvantage to use a faster reel. Okay, so just so it's kind of clear, what we need to do is actually take the rods, put them in combos, and then I would tell you exactly what they're used for and what they're not used for. Okay, now let's start with the lightest combo, and this is a max 100 rod. The minimum is about 60 to 80, depending on let's say a few factors. Okay, so the depth that you're fishing, current, and all that. This is a really good rod. This is I don't want to talk about brands with the rods and stuff, but this is a Zen, and it's the Zen Zagan. It's an old rod. I've had it for years, and it works great. Now, I use this with the Blue Safari, and it used to be that I used a different reel for this, but I found that the Blue Safari is actually perfect for this. It's balances well, and this particular reel is a power gear. Okay, so it's a PG, and with the PG, I am able to work depths of, let's say, up to 50, 60 meters, give or take. Now, this reel can double as a fast jigging reel. This is a low speed reel, low retrieve. Okay, so I did that for a purpose because, and this is why I actually am discussing this first before anything else. Okay, this particular reel, um, it retrieves low speed, and when you're fishing in shallow water, you don't need a super fast reel because you will be yanking that jig pretty fast up in the water column, and then you will not have time to attract the fish. If you're using a low speed reel in depths of up to, let's say, 60 meters and below, a power gear or a low retrieve reel will take in just enough line so that you'd be able to stay in the strike zone longer. The winching power of the power gear is a bonus. Okay, it is an effect of having a low speed reel, a low gear ratio reel, which means it'll give you extra cranking power, and when you actually hook a big one, you are able to pull that beast off of the bottom. Okay, so that is something that you need to put in your head right now. Okay, just put that in your head, and then don't forget that detail because that's very, very important. Next to this, I have a Max 200 rod. Now with this, I am able to fish comfortably up to about 150. So the 100 would be for when the currents are kind of slow, but when it gets kind of heavy and I need a heavier jig, this works well. As a bonus, I could also use this in deeper water with a different reel. Okay, so if I had a fast retrieve Blue Safari, I'd be using it with this in deeper water, let's say at about 150 meters, and that's about as deep as I want to get into the to get into with this rod. Again, serves the same purpose as, almost the same purpose as the Zagan, the Max 100, but also when I'm fishing a similar depth, like take for example a 60 meter depth, and I want my jigs to work faster, this rod gives me the ability to kind of use fast pitching, and it would work really well. Okay, just because this rod is a bit stiffer, so I could use the other one for, let's say, slow pitch, and I could use this for fast pitch. Okay, and at the same depth, and it works really, really well. Now, over that, there is a Max, I would say this is Max 300. Okay, this is an Adagio. This is one of my old rods, and this was my main rod when I was working with Rapala. So this I still use, and I really love it. My original one, okay, uh, there was a guy who shall remain nameless. His name's Rodney. His, he took mine. He took my rod and said like, "Hey, let me borrow that because going on a fishing trip." I let him borrow it. He didn't freaking return it. Okay, and then several months later, he said like, "Okay, the rod has been with me for such a long time. I don't want to return it, but here's a new one." So you know, my original one is with him, and he replaced it with this. So anyway, I use this with an L30. This reel goes really well together with two rods. So I use it here. If I use a maximum of 250, okay, 250. This rod pretty much, for me, the action maxes out at 250. At 300, it kind of becomes really sluggish. So I don't kind of use it for jigs over 250. But 250 and let's say up to 180, this rod works beautifully. Now, aside from this reel, I could use the Blue Safari on this one as well. And I use this when the fish are holding shallower. Okay, so like take for example, if I'm fishing for, we're fishing for tuna, and the tuna are holding at about 60 meters below or shallower. With slow jigs, I use this reel, okay, because it is plenty strong for let's say for long-tailed tuna of up to about let's say 15-12 kilos. This combo will give you so much fun. Okay, the L30 of course, but it's a stronger reel, it's a much more robust reel, and most of the time I use that when that's 90% of my fishing right there, and that's pretty much my main reel. So with that, when they're holding shallow, all I have to do is take off the light line that I have. So when I'm using the max 100 gram, it could be that the Blue Safari will have a 0.8, 1.5. That's it. So when I'm, let's say, using tie rubber, I would use that reel spooled with maximum 1.5, minimum 0.8. And then when I'm out in the deep and I'm going after those tuna, as I mentioned, that are shallower or shallow in the water column, I would use another spool filled with PE2 on that reel. So that's pretty much the last reel that I use the Blue Safari with. So I could use the Blue Safari on 3 reels, and it's, as you can see, that's already very flexible, and that is a PG. So for shallow water, all the way up to blue water fishing, when I'm fishing for fish of up to 15 kilos max, when they're holding shallow, I can use the Blue Safari, and it kind of crosses over in use with the L30. Okay, now the L30, it lives with this particular rod right here. This is the Hotz Stiletto Max 350, and for me, the L30 on this is perfect. It is perfect. There are other rods, of course, but this is what I have, and I love this. Now, this reel is so perfect with this rod that it's this whole combo is very sensitive. Okay, and It has spiral guides. I can't really show you, but I mean, this is not the first time I'm actually shown this. But um, this L30 paired with this rod is just great. It's perfect. PE2. Okay. Uh, I have a spare spool on the L30. As you could, I mean, I've already spoken about how modular these reels are. Okay, so don't be surprised that I have one or more than one spool for these reels. So if I need to, let's say, cut more current, instead of actually putting a heavier weight on my rod, what I do is actually take off the spool and replace it with thinner line. So from 2, I could drop to 1.5. So the spare spool of my L30 is filled with PE 1.5. And let's say there are certain situations where I would get bites at 200. I would drop my line to 1.5 and get an even more vertical drop and get more strikes. Okay, so and that's fishing at around 150 meters or so. So this is what this combo is really good for. Now, basically these rods. Okay, so it could be that I'm using this rod, or I'm using the lighter Adagio with the max 250. Okay, but this one's max 350, which means that I could put more bigger jigs. Sometimes what happens is that I would rig the Blue Safari on one rod and this on the other, and then I would fish the other one, the Blue Safari, in shallower depths, and then I would use this to drop down to the bottom. That way, you know, I always have a combo to use when we spot these tuna, because we always fish for longtails, and sometimes they get really weird and you don't really, although they're on the surface, you don't really catch them on the surface, and you look at the sounder, you see them. And if I have two that's rigged, I don't have to, you know, take off the reel and put in another spool or whatever, or you know, waste time. So if I have these two combos with me, I would, or two rods with me, and just slap the other reel on the rod. And mind you, when it's shallow, when the fish are shallow, you are in contact with the jig, because you're not dropping it down to where the stretch is going to affect everything. Okay, again, this is very situational. So at the maximum of about 60 meters on the drop, it's exactly like you're fishing in shallow water, only you're targeting bigger fish, and you know, they're in the ocean, but the depth range is basically the same. So whether you're not you're hitting bottom is immaterial. Okay, whether or not you're hitting bottom at 60 meters, which is pretty much the maximum for that combo, or for that reel. Okay, it doesn't matter. 60 meters is 60 meters, irregardless if there's water there or the bottom there or not. Okay, now this reel stops at the max 350, and then the next comes the deep liner. This is a number 7, and it is a, I think, max 550 or something like that. And this is the next most useful combo for me, because when the water is, or actually when not the water, but when the drift becomes pretty fast, this is the rod to use. And I use an L50 for this. I have a lot of spools for the L50 because this size is actually, I would believe, the most versatile. Okay, although I favor the L30 for most of my fishing, the L50 is a size that can actually do some heavy lifting as well as some light lifting. So it's a very useful size. That's why I have three of them. Okay, so this one, I have a spool of PE 2, 2.5, and I believe there's one spool filled with PE 4. And that the one that's spooled with PE 4, or sorry, it is 2, 2.5, and 3 for the slow jigs, and there is one reel exclusively spooled with PE 4. So I actually have 3 reels, 3 L50s, and 2 L50s I exclusively use for slow jigging, and one I use for fast jigging. Okay, and two reels are actually power gear. This is the high speed, and then we'll talk about the other one later on. So this particular reel has PE2, and as you could probably tell, it kind of crosses over with the L30. Now the other spool is 2.5, and another spool filled with PE3, just in case I need something with a little bit of grunt. So for this particular one, spooled with PE2, and this is majority of what I use, PE2. So this particular one, when I need something heavy, it can carry up to 550 max. And lately we've been actually going that direction. We're going deeper and deeper, and for that particular reason, I basically put together this combo. So the 550 gives me a very good range, so I could fish anywhere from north of 350 all the way up to 550, and this rod would be able to handle that. And with this, the faster drift on high wind days can be addressed. And sometimes, with the lighter rod and reel, you could still reach the bottom, but you're not too effective at working the jig because the drift is just so fast. And sometimes in these there are instances where they hit bigger jigs. So this combo is practically the next most useful. So max 350 is my most useful combo, and this is the next one. And lately we have been using a lot of, or this has been seeing a lot of use lately. Okay, we're going a lot more deeper and exploring deeper areas, up to, so this combo pretty much is good for up to about 500 meters. So that's 1 gram per meter. Okay, and with the PE 2.5, PE 2, and PE 3, it kind of does a lot of the work correctly. Okay, now that's when I drop all the way to the bottom. If the fish are shallower, I have this, and this is an L50, and it is low speed. Okay, so if the if the this one is fast and this is called an S2T, this is called the PWR. Okay, it is spooled with PE 2.5 as a default. The other one has PE 2. These spools, of course, can be interchanged. I have spare spools. So this has a spare spool. The other one has 2 spare spools. So I have, quite a few spools to play around with. But the spools of these S2Ts and the PWRs are kind of different. So I don't want to mix them up with other things. So this particular one I use when the tuna are shallower and they're a bit bigger. So if the fish are, let's say, if we encounter fish in maximum 60, 70 meters, even up to 80, okay, with this size, okay, even up to 80 because it has a larger arbor, okay, it has a larger spool, so which means it takes up a lot more line. So the depth, because of the size of the spool, actually kind of increases because you're dealing with the retrieve of the line, okay, not the ratio. So a bigger spool will retrieve more line, and therefore you can actually get a bit deeper. In fact, let's say you can use this reel on a lighter rod and you can fish 120 meters with this particular reel. But I use this exclusively for times when, let's say, we encounter tuna of about 20 kilos, 25 or 30 in a shallower area. And this is where it kind of comes into being. And this particular one, again, I'm not gonna talk about the features, okay? But it's a low speed reel and it's perfect for that kind of situation. And you have 2 uses for 1 rod, okay? So that's the, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but so far I've only actually busted out 4 reels and we've already covered 5 rods, okay? So here we go. If you listen carefully, you could actually hear Strider snoring. She's right here. Anyway, so 5 rods. 5 rods. Okay. I'm gonna show you this just so. This is an L50 spooled with PE4. This is what I was telling you about, that I use exclusively for fast jigging. You see that? It says HIR, and I put an X on the HR because this reel used to be a fast retrieve reel, and I Frankensteined it. And I'm proud of that. I Frankensteined it and I made it into a low speed reel. And this is solely dedicated for fast jigging. Okay, so yeah. Can I use it for slow jigging? Of course. But again, certain conditions. And then we already have the other reel, the PWR. So, you know, even if I can use this, I much prefer the PWR because it is way lighter. So I could last longer. It's a bit more sensitive, and sometimes there's that bit where it's difficult to sense the strikes. So that particular reel or that particular combo with the deep liner number 7 is just perfect for that particular purpose. So now we're gonna head into kind of like a heavier territory. So as we're learning more and more about our fishing area and taking a page out of Wael's book, when he buys gear and he says like, oh, it's for traveling, and these are super super heavy, kind of just doesn't make sense when you're fishing in places where 600-gram jig is actually super super heavy already. But then, there are some areas there that we haven't explored yet, and possibly in the future there's a chance for us to do it. That's A. And B, when we're going after like super big tuna of up to 100 kilos. But I mean, the majority, of course, is in the 50 kilo range or thereabouts. So if we're targeting that, I've actually planned for that eventuality. And also, there are times when the current just rips and you need a heavy, heavy jig. So we're talking of something from 600 uh, grams all the way up to 900. And this is where these guys come in. So this is a number 10 deep liner, and this can carry up to 900 grams. Okay, the other one is a Maxell Risky Player 5.5. It's short. Okay, now deep liner has mania fellows, and I chose the deep liner for my slow jigging, my slow pitch, and for my fast pitch, I chose the Risky Player. Okay, so this can go up. These have the same weight. They're in the same weight class, but this particular rod, the Risky Player, it's shorter. So a shorter rod gives you a bit more control. You're actually kind of pumping faster. Okay, since you're dealing with heavier weights, also a shorter rod gives you a bit more leverage without you getting tired, whereas a longer rod would actually kind of work against you. So the reel that I pair this with, there's two. All right, so there is this L100 and the L80. However, okay, again, I have spare spools, so it's kind of easy for me to switch from one to the other. Now the L80, as far as the spare spool is concerned, it's spooled with PE. This one's PE6. Okay, I'll tell you that right now. It's PE6, and yes, I can use it for tuna and all that, but I actually kind of prefer to use this for fast jigging. Okay, so this particular one I use for fast jigging. However, I have extra spools for both the 100 and the 80, so that I would be able to use it for slow jigging. So this one is a power gear, which means that I can use this on either of these rods. See, I just had to time it when there's something important. I just have to time it when the dogs are barking. That way you get the better you get the information, with dog noises to go with it. So with the 80, let's say if I'm fishing shallow, this is what I use, and PE6, I could just slap it on, fish for those bigger tuna, and I could choose whether I would be using a more natural movement, let's say the slow pitch movement, and I use that when they're bait profiling or they're just being divas, So when they're not too active, I can use the logical. Okay, now with the same reel, I could use it on the Maxell, and when the fish are active, this is the go-to rod. Now, it's also the reason why I chose this, because with this rod, I can actually pull back. It's designed so that you'd be able to pull back. And I've tested this out. I've tried it, and I've caught like very decent sized longtail tuna on this. And my gosh, it was so easy. It was just so easy. So I stuck with it. Instead of actually getting rid of it, I actually liked it and said like, okay, I'm gonna, use that. So for a fast pitch, that's what I use. When I want to drop down to the depths of over 500 meters, this is the monster I choose to go with. This is an L100. Currently, the biggest production size that Studio Oceanmark has. Okay, so this particular reel, it is basically a wide 80. So the 80 and the 100 share the same diameter, but the 100 is wider. This is the 80, this is the 100. As you can see, the 100 is wider. Now, this is especially important when I'm dropping down deep. Because when you're dropping down deep, your spool diminishes, which means your drag spikes up really high if it's narrow. But with a wider spool, what happens is that the drag spike becomes a bit more manageable. Now, 90% of the time for this, I use the Logical. And it's a perfect fit. It is a perfect fit. This is basically the rod it calls home. Okay, it balances really well. It feels great working it. This is an HG because at those extreme depths, you want to always be in touch with your jig. So it has a fast ratio, longer handle, makes it easier to crank, very easy on the body. And I'll be very honest, I've used this combo and I've caught fish, but I have not used this rod, the Risky Player, with this reel because I don't feel like fast pitching in really deep water. It's difficult, and I'm getting old. I'm not as strong. I'm not as strong as I used to. I'm better looking than I used to be, because when I was younger, I was hella ugly or uglier. But as I I am getting older, and I find myself getting a bit lazier, and fast pitching in that kind of depth with those kinds of size jigs just kind of becomes work. So I'd rather just kind of take things easy, and the Logical is perfect for that. Okay, but I know there will be a day when I would have to actually do this. Okay, but guess what? When that day comes, I have the combo for it. Okay, so that's it. So that brings us to the end of all of this, and wow, I expected this to be a bit longer, but we're actually doing okay with 40 minutes. So hopefully I'm not gonna, after I scan this, I'm not gonna cut it, because this is a very good discussion, and I believe this is something that something that would clear up a lot of things. Okay, now the very thing that you take away from this video is the fact that just because it's a low speed reel, it doesn't mean to say that you can't use it for slow jigging. You can, but there are certain situations where you can use it effectively, and there are some situations where it's not going to give you any advantage, and that has a lot to do with depth. So you can drop down and use low speed reels just as long as you have the right line, because you can't use thick line. It's slow jigging. Okay, so slow jigging will always have thin line, and the standard is PE2. Now over that would be kind of specialized fishing already. So like take for example, when you're fishing for tuna, you go up to like PE3. You can go up to PE6 if you want. There's PE6, PE8, even PE10. But those are very I would say specific and very specialized fisheries. So I would say like for me, the L80 I use PE6 on it, and in a pinch I'd be able to put that on the risky player and probably do well with it. But I've rigged it for fast jigging, and it will be more effective as a fast jigging reel. If I want to use it for slow jigging, I would put PE3 on it, and that would make the jigs move better. Because again, you know, if the fish are active, and if I wanna catch those active fish, I'm not gonna be using slow jigs and slow jigging. I would be actually using fast jigging gear, because with fast jigging, not only would I have an advantage of a fast moving target for the fish to actually chase and want to chase and and catch the most active fish, and more than likely the bigger fish within the school, but I would have the advantage of the gear actually helping me land these fish, fight the fish more effectively. Uh, the logical is a 100% jig manipulation tool. So it has no business fighting fish. And when you fight the fish, you with the logical, you point it to the fish. So pure slow jigging rods, you have to point the rod to the fish and fight with your reel, because these rods are designed to move the jig so enticingly that when the fishing becomes difficult, when the fish just refuse to bite, okay, the rods enable the jigs to dance so seductively, and it gives you a chance for these inactive fish to want to strike that jig. This is the whole reason why you have very light reels, because sometimes these strikes are very subtle, and if you have a heavy combo, you're not going to feel anything, because the mass actually absorbs the vibration, whereas with a lighter rod and reel, especially with a lighter reel, you feel those vibrations because it accentuates the vibrations instead of actually absorbing it, because it has a big mass. So the 100 serves the purpose of fishing in very deep water. I've discussed the sizes all the way down to the lightest reel that I have for the purpose, which is the Blue Safari. This is not final, okay? Obviously, I have a relationship with Studio Ocean Mark, as probably a lot of you already know. So, as new technology and new reels become available, things get adjusted, and the gaps in the system would get filled. So for now, we have several gaps in the system, and probably a few more rods that I need to fill the gaps before I could say that, okay, this whole system is good. But for what I have now, this system actually covers a lot of fishing situations. So let's say I would need another Blue Safari to cover a few things. I would need probably an L100 and an L80 in the S2T and PWR down the line, just because I need something that's lighter, especially when I'm fishing places where the fishing pressure is actually quite high up. So again, everything is subject to evolution, because that's how we learn and that's how we progress. However, I'm not saying that you need all of this, and I'm not saying that uh, it's applicable for everyone. But however, I have to tell you this, that this is something that I do as part of a job. So I have to prepare myself, or I have to have gear, which are tools to make me effective in these certain situations. But 90% of the situations that you would face would actually be within the, I would say, max 100 to max 350. Okay, so that range. And then above that becomes a bit specialized. Below, let's say below 80 is a whole different topic, which we will talk about down the line. All right, but hopefully this video clears a lot of things up for you guys, in that I've answered quite a few questions. If you still have questions, drop them in the comment section. And yeah, for those guys that are new, this channel talks about the hows and whys of fishing. We cover everything from big game, ultralight, everything in the middle, including fly fishing. So if you're into fishing and you want to learn, click on that subscribe button, do a search in the channel, and more than likely I've had discussions about other topics and all that. We do a lot of DIYs, of course. So yeah, if you want to learn, just click on that subscribe button. If you've learned something from this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to grow as a fishing group, share this video or share any video that you find interesting that your friends would be able to learn from. Okay, so share. That's it. Alrighty, so reactions, violent or otherwise, comment section. Alrighty, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. By the way, thanks to Studio Ocean Mark for all these reels and the tools. Okay, of course, I've switched from my past brand to Studio Ocean Mark because of the modularity of these reels. I know that I've mentioned a lot about changing spools, and for the Blue Safari it's 1 screw, for the L30 it's 3, 4 for the rest, and I think the L50 actually has 3 as well, but the L80 and the L100 has 4, and these screws don't pop out. So even on the boat, you can change everything on the fly, and all you need is a common screwdriver, which I always have in my reel bag. So just because of the modularity of these reels, it becomes very simple. And instead of actually carrying around a lot of reels, I just carry a few with me on the trip. Now, do I carry all of this? By the way, I forgot to mention, do I carry all of this? No. Majority of the time, I only carry 2 or 3 of these rods and 2 reels. Okay, because with those 3 reels, I would be able to switch things around, and then with 3 or 4 rods, I'd be able to cover a lot of situations. So unless, let's say, Faisal says like, hey, we're going after like really big tuna far out, and then I'd take the big stuff, the L80, the L100, and the rods that go with it, and that's it. Okay, but majority of the time I would have one L50 for deep water. This definitely take it, and then 1 other rod. That's it. So 1 max 550, 1 max 350, and probably a backup. If not, they'll just be those 2 and then a backup rod, or a backup reel. That's it. Alrighty. So that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Class dismissed.